Hello again guys and welcome back to the House of Devlin. I'm Big Al Devlin. In front of you you see a big map of Yggdrasil, the world tree, which is essentially the universe but for the Vikings. And you can see actually it's, you know what, in some ways it's quite a good way of representing, especially for such an ancient culture, the cosmological world that does exist as we know it now with telescopes and as such. Now I'm not going to get into that, but what I'm going to go into is I'm just going to give you a brief description or essentially take you through the illustration in front of you. It's the first time I've actually been able to put a picture to my words, except for my terrible art attack attempt when I was describing what fate is like for Vikings and practitioners of Nordic paganism essentially. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start down in the middle. In the middle you'll see a big green circle saying a Midgard. Okay, so Midgard is the mortal realm. That's the realm where men live, and it was formed from Ymir's body to be precise, when Odin Villiam killed him during the early part of, the universe essentially. The hair is his trees, his skull is the sky, and there are four dwarfs called Northeast, South and West, which hold up his skull and hold up the sky for us. That's how lovely they are. And underneath it you'll see a hemisphere called the Midgard Ocean. So essentially the Vikings saw that Midgard was surrounded by water. You got to bear in mind the Nordic people, they were a coastal people. The ocean and the seas, they were very important to them, not only for going on raids but also for fishing and surviving. If it weren't for the fish that they could get from the waters, they probably would have starved, because their land was okay for farming and it was good quality. There just wasn't a lot of it, and that's why they went usually fighting one another over potentially a lack of food at times. But they believed that within the Midgard Ocean, or the ocean that surrounded the realms that they lived in, there lived a creature called Jormungandr, and you've heard me mention him before. I've got a tattoo of him on my left shoulder. Jormungandr was the one of the children of Loki, and he is actually the giant. He's actually a form of giant that kills Thor during Ragnarok. Thor also kills him, so it's even Stevens, but nonetheless they do have a couple of bouts during the reign of Odin. So it's not their first fight, but it's the last fight. Let's put it that way. The first fight where Jormungandr can get away, because Thor always had that slight advantage. But Jormungandr kills Thor during the fight with his fangs. About halfway through the fight, he manages to sink one of his fangs into Thor and poisons him, and his poison is so powerful, it is powerful enough to kill a god. And Thor, being one of the most powerful of the gods, that's quite a potent poison. Now, connecting Midgard to Asgard, you'll see that big rainbow-looking sort of bit, and that is the Bifrost, or I would call it the Bifrost, but a lot of people call it the Bifrost, which is the Rainbow Bridge. Now, this was a way of allowing the gods to visit the Midgard realm regularly without any real hindrance. It was instantaneous travel for all intents and purposes. However, obviously, it did give access to the right, if you knew how, to Asgard. And so Heimdall, the Watchman of the Gods, who's one of my favourite characters, who I will do a video on at one point, because I believe he is something else. He's not Asgardian, by the way. He's not a Aisha, and he's not Fenrir, as far as I understand. He's something altogether different. I think he's like the Norns. He's something just very different compared to what else you see in the universe. He's an excellent character to do a focus on, an excellent god to do a focus on. But Heimdall essentially sees everything in the universe. I mean, how cool is that? He sees everything and he can hear everything, and so he makes the perfect guard essentially across this bridge essentially that connects Midgard and Asgard. Now, within Asgard, obviously you have this would be now considered one of the branches of the Yggdrasil world tree, but within Asgard, this is essentially the realm of the gods. You've got Odin himself, his Valhalla, his hall of the fallen, and you have essentially the gods of civilization have this, as they've described here, the ice shear, which is wrong, because actually that's wrong. It should be changed to the ice shear stroke Vanir unification, I suppose, because the ice shear and the Vanir, they did ally up after a war between themselves, and you can see Vanir on the other side, on the right hand side to Asgard. That's Vanhenheim. Vanhenheim was around where the Vanir come from, and they were a tribe of gods that were equal in power to the Asgardians. And so Odin and, in this case, Njorda, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but anyway, the king of the Vanir and Odin, they were at war for a very long time, and basically they came to a truce because it was either going to end up in one eternal war where neither side wins or both sides lose. They all die, so they decided to ally up and unify because they had very similar morals, very similar virtues. I don't even know really why they went to war, because it was pure greed perhaps, because they should never have gone to war. They were never really enemies, just like the giants were to the Asgardians, for example. But they did form an alliance regardless, and within Asgard, basically what happened was back then when, noble houses won or lost wars to another noble house, they would be in exchange of prisoners to ensure that no further bloodshed was caused, that, the war was over. Basically, you'd take hostages, and to Asgard, the most prominent prisoner, so to speak, was sent Freya. Now, she's not a prisoner now. I mean, they had a little bit more of a conflict, so we say, when they formed Kavoshia, just prior to forming Kavoshia, but up to that point she was considered a prisoner until basically the truce was fully formed into an alliance. And she continued to reside within Asgard, so you'll find Freya over in Asgard, even though in theory her home is Vanhenheim. Now Vanhenheim is the really, as I say, the world, or the realm, the home realm for the fertility gods. So you've got Freya, Njorda, there's a few others. They're not really mentioned that often because they don't really play a major role. The Asgardians are very warlike, for Odin, Tyr, they're warlike gods, and so they tend to take your fancy a lot more, and there's a lot more stories about them. Whereas the Vanir, they don't really tend to go adventuring that often, and when they do, they use their powerful magics to get them out of sticky situations and influence those around them. The last and final branch of the tree is Alfheim. I know nothing really of this place at the moment. I will have to look it up. But essentially, you've got this is the realm where the elves live. Now, I do know that humans didn't particularly like elves. They didn't have a hatred for them like they would trolls, for example. But they designed runes that could be tattooed on you or worn as jewelry, which would act as, well, they were called troll runes, but they would act as protection against elvish magic. So elves were magical, and they would probably, I imagine, they were like pixies and things like that, that kind of elf. They would mislead you, and they would confuse you and hex you and things like that, and so you could protect yourself against their magic by wearing something called a troll rune, which is interest. It shows you the interaction between humans and elves wasn't obviously the best interaction possible, but I've never heard of them doing anything too nasty, but we'll get into that in later stories. We'll go to Niffleheim next. Niffleheim's on the far right, just underneath Vanhenheim. Niffleheim is, and really, we'll talk about Muspelheim at the same time. They're on either side of Midgard, okay? These two are the original realms that existed at the beginning of the cosmology. Now, at this point, they existed because well, they've always been around for some reason. There's no explanation, but Muspelheim and Niffleheim have always been there, even before the other realms formed, even before there was gods. And what they did is they had this vast expanse between them called Gununganap, which is basically nothingness, as it's described in the Viking Eddas, an area where not even silence exists. That's how nothing we're talking about, right? Now, Niffleheim, currently, this map or essentially of Yggdrasil. Shows you the realms at the time where Odin is king. It's essentially during the rule of Odin. It should be sort of present day in theory, or the golden age of the Vikings at the very least. It shows you that this is the realm of the frost giants. The other elements, I mean, yeah, dragons, they were fairly common to, well, not common, but they were within the poems of the Vikings. Beowulf fought one, I think, at one point and stuff. But the main thing to say about Niffleheim and Muspelheim is that from them, their regions, their borders colliding during their expanse during the beginning of the cosmology, you saw the birth of all the gods and godlike creatures. Those that were created purely of ice, that old Humbler found literally buried within the ice, were creatures of pure creative nature. It didn't mean they couldn't do bad things. They were destructive from time to time, but they had more of a creative nature than they did that of a destructive one. Whereas those that had been formed where the ice had been corrupted by the fires of Muspelheim, well, they had a bad streak in them. They had, and a prime example of this are the giants. The giants were formed of both ice and fire, and there are some good giants out there. Not all giants are what you would describe as evil, and we don't like that word evil in paganism because it's not strictly true. I mean, that good and evil, these are terms that are really only used in sort of monotheistic religions, but in a polytheistic religion you don't need simple terms as good and evil. There's a lot of grey matter, so we say, in between. There's a lot of in between bits. Everyone is good, everyone is bad, and everyone has a lot of in between bits. But you know, the people, the gods that found themselves corrupted by the fires in their creation, by the fires of Muspelheim with the ices of Niffleheim, are a little bit more bad than the others. They're a little bit more destructive in nature. They are a little bit more mischievous and a little bit more untrustworthy, so we say. Now within Muspelheim you'll find Surtur, as they've written here, but sometimes called Sut, the king of the fire giants, and of course this is the realm of the fire giants. Now Surt is the ultimate end game kind of guy. He destroys all of creation for ultimate purposes. He spends all of eternity forging a big gigantic fire sword that when Ragnarok occurs, he finds his way out of Muspelheim and goes and basically destroys all the other realms. So he's the ultimate sort of, as I say, endgame guy. He's the guy who ends Ragnarok and allows then life to continue again. I mean, not much is said is what happens to him. I will have to check it up at a later time, but that's essentially Muspelheim, a land of fire. Now, we go back towards the centre. In the centre, as I say, Midgard, Muspelheim, Niffleheim, that forms the trunk of the tree, right? At the bottom, you've got Helheim. Okay, this is one of the roots of the tree. Helheim is the realm where a lot of essentially the lost souls go. This is an area where all the liars, the cheats, the oath breakers, the cowards, these are where all the people go who are not found worthy of the halls of Valhalla or the meadow of Folkvangir, or have not been taken by Ran, for example. These are lost souls. They are tortured souls. This is not a nice place to go. And the goddess who rules over this particular realm named herself Hel after the realm. That's not her actual name. She was never named at birth. She was cast out of Asgard quite early on. And she actually has half the body of a rotting corpse and the other half of a beautiful maiden, literally down the middle. So, you might think, wow, she's beautiful, and all of a sudden she turns around and looks at you and you're like, holy crap, but she's a very vicious person, god, and she's a giantess, and she leads her army of the dead during Ragnarok against Asgard and forms an assault on the walls of Asgard. In between Midgard and Helheim, however, you do see this very interesting area. Now, this is not a realm, and that's an important thing to point out. This is not a realm, so it's not subjected to the same laws as such as the other realms are, which is, of course, fate. Every realm is ruled by fate within Viking and Nordic belief systems. But those areas that are outside the realms, maybe they're not really ruled by these kind of things. And so the Norns, three Norns that look after the well of Erd, Erd coming from the word weird meaning destiny in Old English. You get a sense that basically the Norns are looking after this area of destiny, and that they themselves are immune to it. They're not affected to it. They're not there to look after their own destiny. It would seem a futile attempt in many ways. And so their positions of true neutrality, they never really do anything other than watch over the Well of Erd and give Odin an opportunity to drink from the well to gain foresight of his own death, which he does. They make a bet with him. They say, well, we bet you won't pull out your right eye out of your, just pluck out your right eye and we'll let you drink from the well. Well, they didn't understand Odin. He was a very stubborn character, and he did it without a moment's hesitation. And so obviously they were bound by their word and let him drink from the well of Erd, which was not a good thing. You should never let anyone have a complete and absolute foresight of their death and everyone else's death. But there you go. The Norns should really be the only ones with that power. The Swans of Herd, well, they're just a bunch of swans that swim around on the waters of Erd. But what's important about this bit is that from the Well of Erd you get the flow of fate, and see it as a flow of water. They get taken up by the roots, Helheim, Jotunheim, and Svartalfheim. They get taken up by the roots and then enter the other realms. And that passage of fate, or the waters of fate essentially, from the Well of Erd into all the different realms allows for the passage of time. If at any point those waters, those fates are interrupted in their passage, then you simply time stops. So fate is very important to a Viking or Nordic paganist, because without it, there's no existence. Fate is fate. It's as simple as that. And I have got a video that goes into fate into more detail, and it lasted, I think it was 3 videos, and overall lasted about an hour and a half. So I'm not going to go any more about it, guys. So I've gone on 17 minutes already. But please check that out if you want to hear more about fate. Now, Jotunheim on the far left, this is the giant's homeland. I don't know why they call it as that, because that's what confused me on my first video. I actually made a mistake and said that this is where all the giants lived. I think I made a mistake anyway. But essentially, all giants come from Niffleheim, and all giants come from a mixture of Niffleheim and Muspelheim, okay, because all giants are the sons and daughters, ultimately, of the very first giant called Ymir. Ymir, who is now, of course, Midgard, who's converted into Midgard, or turned into flayed, so we say, into Midgard by Odin, Vili, and Ve. Vili and Ve were Odin's brothers, but they were all born ultimately of Ymir, or are the the grandsons or the great grandsons and daughters of Ymir. However, Jotunheim, I imagine, is just a realm where a lot of giants reside. It's where I assume essentially the mass majority of them that don't really have stories, who don't really play a part to play in the overall great scheme of things, would reside, because the ones that you got to keep your eyes on are the ice giants, the fire giants. Fire giants are sort of an end game, as I say, with Cert, so they don't really play a major role until the end. But it's the named giants that you need to keep your eyes out for. Like I say, Hel, Jormungandr, Fenrir, things like that. They're the ones to keep an eye on, because they're the ones who do the most damage. But the giants of Jotunheim, I imagine during Ragnarok, I've not read about it, but I imagine they would have assaulted quite happily Asgard as part of the forces. So you can see how Ragnarok comes along. You've got Helheim, you've got Jotunheim, you've got Muspelheim, potentially you've got Asgard. And gods are the giants are powerful, perhaps more powerful than the gods themselves. I mean, in every story you read, you get a group of 2 or 3 gods, normally Loki, Thor, and one other god, for example. And those 3 gods, they're afraid of taking on one single giant by themselves. Giants are very, very powerful gods. So, you know, whether they have numbers or not, it doesn't really matter. They have the power, and it is known that they are the most powerful gods around, but they are kept very much in check by the gods of Asgard, because they are just purely a destructive force, so they are hard to unite. It's only during Ragnarok that they unite and attack together as one, and they're successful. They destroy the heavens, they destroy Midgard. So good on them, I suppose. Eventually they actually achieve something, but for the mass majority of the time, the gods of Asgard do keep them in check. Now, the gods of Asgard and the gods of Vanheim, should I say. Now, Svartalheim is the land of the Dark Elves and the land of the Dwarfs. Now, I don't know a lot about the Dark Elves, although obviously they were in one of the movies by Marvel, that movie called Thor. There's a lot of wrong points in their film series. Don't get me wrong, I love their films, but yeah, they're wrong. Don't take them as a history lesson. Use them to sort of spike some passion for Nordic paganism by all means, but don't take whatever they say with a pinch of salt. But the Dark Elves come from this realm here, but more importantly, it's the land of the Dwarfs, and the Dwarfs do play a major role within Nordic paganism. The Dwarfs play a role in the sense that they are master smiths, and they build a lot of the weapons that the Asgardians use. Mjolnir, my pronunciations are terrible, guys, but anyway, the Hammer of Thor, that's a product of the Dwarfs. They forge it. Mjolnir. Okay, that is the Hammer of Thor, and it's forged by the Dwarfs. And they forged some many mighty or really cool artifacts for the Asgardians, often as gifts or as tithes. And one last point. Dwarfs are not necessarily small. Dwarf in old language does not mean small or diminutive. It doesn't mean that they suffer from dwarfism or anything like that. Dwarf is just a species name, just like a chimpanzee or a human or whatever. It doesn't matter. The dwarf bit, don't let that. Just like giant, actually, giant also doesn't mean something of great size. Giants were probably of human size, as were dwarfs, as were Asgardians. They could probably walk amongst us and we wouldn't tell a difference. It's just the name that they were given to their tribe of their tribe, essentially. So when you look at dwarfs, when you look at elves and dark elves, when you look at giants and you look at Asgardians and the Fenrir from Vanheim, you've got to remember all of these are gods. Not one of these are godlike or lesser godlike beings, you know, like sort of demigods. They're all fully fledged gods, every single one of them. Okay, not the dragon of Niffleheim, but you know what I mean. The giants, the dwarfs, well, I don't know about the elves, but probably the elves, and obviously the fire giants, the ice giants, normal giants, the Asgardians, the Fenrir. All of them are gods. Every single one of them. These are all powerful beings, very, very powerful beings, and they are to be respected very much. I mean, you would never catch a Nordic paganist worshipping Hel, for example, or a dwarf or anything like that, but they are to be, I mean, let's put it this way, you'd be afraid if one of those suddenly appeared in front of you. Anyway, guys, I hope this image sort of clears up the cosmology for you that I've done over the last few videos. I've dedicated a lot of time to it all, and in the top right hand corner and the top left hand corner you also get the moon and the sun. Okay, Sol, who's the goddess of the sun, and Mani, who's the god of the moon. You'd think it'd be the other way around, that the sun would be male and the moon would be female, but there we go. But both of them are chased through the skies, or through the cosmos, essentially, by wolves called Skull and Hati. Hatred. Hati means hatred, and Skull means oh god, spite, I think it means. Okay, these are the sons of Fenrir, but as I said in previous videos, I believe that they are simply shamanistic projections, familial projections of Fenrir, ultimately. So I believe they are just Fenrir, just chasing the moon and the sun. And my reasons for that is that, well, Odin and Freya have them. You know, Odin has his ravens and his dogs, and he even has his Valkyrie. They're shamanistic projections. So Fenrir is still a god. He's very bestial, but he's still quite a powerful god. And so I imagine, even though he's not practicing shamanistic magic, his sheer bestiality can come out in almost like when he's asleep. He's still rages on in these spiritual forms, so to speak, chasing the sun and the moon, or they may of course be literal children of his. But there we go. There's no reference to a mother though, so maybe my point is a stronger one than I believe. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit different to the others. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will see you soon. Goodbye.